At this time, I'd like to call our meeting to order. Could we please all rise for the pledge of allegiance?
Allegiance to the flag of the God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Could we have a motion to approve the agenda, please?
I move to approve.
Second.
Oh, it's been moved and approved. Moved and seconded, excuse me, to approve the agenda. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, I'd ask all trustees who wish to approve of this agenda to signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Any abstentions? At this time, I would welcome a motion to move into executive session.
So moved, Madam Chairman.
Okay, thank you. And a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor of moving into executive session, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. And any abstentions? Okay, we will move into executive session at this time.
They're going into executive session now to discuss the case. I'm going to call from them.
Okay.
I call you too. Ask you some questions. Basically, that's the answer to you.
Maybe we are to rigid in our interpretation. Okay, we are on to item E. We're considering the action resulting from the executive session for a student disciplinary action.
Madam Chair, in the matter of student 2020-21-01, I move that administration proceed with the recommendation by Mr. Kramer and Mr. Pointle.
Thank you, sir. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those wishing to approve of the disciplinary course suggested by Mr. Kramer and Mr. Plendel, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Any abstentions? And that matter has been approved unanimously. Okay, item F. We are looking at the tabled item from our August 11th, 2020 meeting, which was a contract with Start Autism Support. Is there a motion?
So moved.
And the recommendation is that we rescind the contract with Start Autism in the amount of $12,000 and approve the revised contract presented at the August 11, 20 meeting in the revised amount. And that's your motion, right? Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion?
I had asked to remove that from the consent agenda back in the, or maybe not consent, but anyway,
Yeah.
I'm the reason why this got tabled. I'm satisfied with this explanation.
And do you need any more information from Mrs. Nickel?
I don't.
All right, any other discussion? Hearing none, I'd ask those wishing to approve of this modification of the contract and adoption of the contract signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Any abstentions? That item is passed unanimously. Item G. We are considering the approval of purchases exceeding $5,000 for the purchase technology hardware to facilitate remote student learning. And the recommendation is that we approve this purchase. Is there a motion? Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
So this, with the CARES Act, is this like others where we have purchased it and then it's going to be reimbursed?
That is correct. This is through, this specific amount is through the governor's allocation. And so because it's technology related, we put in for it specifically. And so that was the intention of that. This is also specifically for our remote and our virtual students, and primarily remote students. And we've had approximately just under 200 students that are either participating remotely or virtually in the district. And so it is a significant amount of students that this technology will assist.
And we have the infrastructure to be able to maintain this.
And we feel actually too, this is something that as we look even past what may be COVID-19 related, with the convenience of our educational platforms right now, it will be probably necessary even into the future to offer these type of learning opportunities for families, because as time progresses, convenience is a significant factor in reducing our students who may be choosing to leave the district for various reasons but still reside in the district. And so the more that we can refine this practice and this situation, the more that we can maintain those students who are living in the district, maybe accessing other virtual platforms and keep that opportunity within the district.
Is this already approved through the CARES Act? We just have to, I mean, the funding is approved if we say we want to go forward.
That is correct.
And I know Mr. Foster had mentioned that we'd approved a purchase of something similar, but not for it was less pieces of equipment, but you had mentioned that we're in the line to see more. This is what you were referring to?
That's correct.
Any Anything further about this purchase? All trustees wishing to approve of this purchase, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Any abstentions? And that has passed unanimously. Item H, we are considering the approval of contracting with Tiny Eye Therapy Services for district speech language services for the upcoming school year. And the recommendation is to approve this contract. Is there a motion?
So moved, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second?
Any discussion? Hearing
guess-
none. Go
Sorry,
ahead.
the only question I would have is, assuming this works, is there a desire to continue with the remote option in certain situations versus, is it more efficient to use this option?
Trina, if you want to speak to that, I'll allow you to speak to that and probably better answer that question. Were you able to hear Trustee Miller's question?
I was. So you were asking about whether we'll plan on continuing to use that. So it is kind of a convenient service this year because they're used to providing services in an online format. So if heaven help us, we end up in tier 3. Switching those kids over to home services will be like super easy because they just schedule with the families for those services. But long term, we'd like to have another in-district person. My understanding is there may be 2 or 3 viable candidates that are finishing school right now that are local, or from local families. But we've always had Tiny Eye on board since I've been here. I'm going into my 5th year now. We've always had Tiny Eye provide the services for like the students at Valley Christian, because we do have an obligation to provide some services to private school students. And also we've periodically had students where they do homeschool, like parent-led education at home, where they can also access some limited services. So we've used Tiny Eye to provide that service. So I still see us partnering with them. I'm just not sure to what extent. Did that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any further discussion, questions, comments? Hearing none, I'd ask all trustees wishing to approve of this contract to signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. And any abstentions? And this passed unanimously. Item I, we are considering the approval of contracting with Barker and Associates for the repairs to the TMS intercom system. The recommendation is to approve this contract. Is there a motion?
So moved, Madam Chair.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, I'd ask all trustees wishing to approve of this contract to signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Any abstentions? And this is passed unanimously. Item J, we are considering the approval of the district copier lease with the recommendation to approve rewriting the copier lease agreement as delineated in the agenda. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion? Hearing none, I'd ask the trustees who wish to approve rewriting this copier lease to signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Any abstentions? And that has been approved unanimously.
Madam Chairman, before we adjourn, could Superintendent Kramer explain the waivers and the occupancy and all the things for the sports upcoming agenda?
That was my plan, Trustee Wagner, but thank you for speaking.
And we've
I
got,
did not give Trustee Patrick a heads up that I would be doing that, so thank you.
and we've got one more business item before we get to that, Trustee Wagner. We are considering the temporary suspension of our district attendance policy for the upcoming school year. And the recommendation is to approve the suspension. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
So that's actually,
Can I speak to this?
Absolutely.
So our thought process in regarding this being that we are highly encouraging individuals who are showing signs of illness to stay home. In other years, really, we've reinforced a really intense requirement on attendance, which we know definitely impacts student learning. We don't discount that in this situation, but we also do not want to put a heavy burden on families. If a student has a runny nose or a cough, we would prefer that they not come to school. But we don't want to put that burden on them of having to go to a doctor's visit to demonstrate or show proof that because of this situation, they're not at school. We want to provide that opportunity for them to make a quality decision at home and not have to have the burden of having to visit a doctor in some situations where it just makes sense for them to stay home. It is really driven home by the situation that we had today, or last evening, in fact, where we did have our first positive case. And the student made the wise decision along with their parents. As soon as they demonstrated signs of the virus, they stayed home and were tested. By doing that, that provided us opportunity to not have other people exposed by making sure that they felt as a family that they had to go to school. But by reducing the things that were specifically mandated in this policy, we're able to still have those conversations with families, because we still will have attendance conversations, because those are still important, because we know attendance is such a significant situation for us to address. But it allows for us to do it in a way that might look different than previous years, because we feel this is a different and unique year. This also allows us to kind of incorporate that synchronous learning opportunities for students, that even though they are absent, they can still take part in the classroom. Mr. Christensen actually did share with me a picture that he took today where we had one of the classrooms where a number of the students that were quarantined due to their exposure were home, Zooming in, much like we see here, along with an instructor who was Zooming in from their location while students were present in the classroom. So this is going to be unique. This is going to be a unique year, and I appreciate the trustees for bringing it and suggesting that we take a look and suspend this policy due to the COVID-19 and the other burdens that this could possibly create for families.
There was a question or remark from?
Well, he answered my question, really kind of reiterating that throughout that policy and the admin reg, there are, to me, just these implicit things that we do to check on students, whether it's, to make sure that we're, for lack of better, at least showing that we care and that we want them there. But so it was important, I guess, to me to hear that we were still going to make those efforts to check up on them and make sure that they're getting what they need as far as school.
As administration school staff, we still realize that this is extremely important for attendance to be verified and then to be in person as much as possible. But this really allows us to curtail the consequences that are associated with it, as opposed to the steps we still would take as school officials to make sure we're in continuous communication with those families.
Excellent. Any further questions, remarks, concerns? Hearing none, I'd ask the trustees who wish to approve this temporary suspension of district policy to signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Any abstentions? And item K is passed unanimously. And I will turn things over to Superintendent Kramer.
Trustee Wagner had reached out to me to ask to provide an update on our extracurricular activity attendance and where we were at with variances and exceptions. Currently, the staff at all of our high schools have met with their parents and shared with them information regarding our indoor activities, which we will have a face covering requirement because it allows for us to significantly increase the amount of people that can attend. If we did not have a face covering requirement at our facilities, Southeast would only be able to have 43 attendees at their volleyball game. Lingo Fort Laramie would only be able to have 48, and Torrington High School would only be able to have 100. Because we are requiring face coverings, we are able to increase that to 250 individuals at those events, which means the difference between a student only being able to have maybe mom or dad to being able, as many as the seniors, I think, have 6 at Torrington High School. Is that correct, Mr. Flendel? And so that really allows a significant amount and almost a sense of being close to what we've been able to do in the past. So our indoor events have been set in that way. Now, there isn't as clear cut in our outdoor events. And so I did file, based on consensus at our last meeting, for 3 exceptions to the attendance rule for outdoor events. Now, that was prior to an expansion of those, but I still submitted those so we could get an idea if we would need them to follow that exemption. And those exemptions were for 1,000 attendees at Torrington High School outdoor events for football, if we had the face covering requirement, and 750 at Lingo Fort Laramie and Southeast. Now, with the new state health orders increasing the amount of attendees that were available based on social distancing, we have submitted a diagram to County Health to verify that that is the amount of capacity that we have at each of our facilities. And so at Torrington High School, for example, as we laid out our potential layout for keeping social distance, if the county health officials would deem that that is exactly how we want you to figure that attendance, we would be able to get to 1,000 people without face coverings. Now, that is only if the way we figured it is deemed appropriate. And so we're still in a waiting game right now because those exemptions are still on Dr. Harris' desk. And so if we are denied that capacity is accurate and they get us to let's just say a number at 500 for Torrington High School events, and our exemption would be approved for face coverings up to 1,000, that would change exactly what direction we would go. But right now, we're kind of waiting for 2 different answers. We're waiting for the answer on the exemption, and we're waiting on the answer on, this is how we figured out our capacity, is this accurate? And so depending upon what answer we receive, it will dictate what direction we kind of proceed with our fans coming in. We know we want to provide as many people as we possibly can to events. Preferably, if that number is equal, we would prefer to not have a face covering requirement, as that is what state health deems is appropriate. And so we're perfectly fine with that. But we want to make sure we have the maximum amount of people we can have at our extracurricular activities.
Absolutely.
Will the 30% still be in effect for visitors?
That is correct. Thank you, Trustee Wagner. Yes. So each of the conferences that each school has been a part of has deemed it appropriate to have 30% of whatever the capacity is for the visiting teams. Now, we did look at, and the Wyoming High School Athletic Association was trying to work with the NFHS in regards to our cameras. They were trying to negotiate a lower fee to allow for all viewing of events at all those locations for a reduced fee. Right now, that cost is $3,000, where as a school, we could pay that and have anybody watch our home events. Mr. Flendel was able to have a meeting with his conference, and 7 out of the 8 teams in his conference are advocating to have that, which is significant for us because that means that we, by paying that, get to kind of more or less join a group that will have everything for free. So our visiting fans will be able to watch ours, but we as visiting fans would be able to watch 7 out of our 8. So in that situation, it is very probable that we will probably continue with Torrington High School. Unfortunately, in the conferences that Southeast and Lingo Fort Laramie are a part of, the other schools did not come to the consensus that they wanted to put in for that amount. to have theirs for free. And so we feel that it would not be the best expenditure for our local individuals to only make our home events free, because it doesn't get us anything as we travel to other locations on the majority of our places to go. And unfortunately, that's a little bit different in different conferences and different kind of thoughts and processes. They will still cover, and for a membership, which is, I think, Mr. Flendel, do you recall what that cost is?
$9.95 a month, or it might have gone up to $11.95. It's somewhere in that ballpark.
So that you would still be able to access away games for that cost if individual families would still access that. In the past year, I have chosen to make that choice, and it is an affordable cost versus driving to those locations. We would have obviously preferred all the conference schools that Southeast and Lingle were joining, and I would have made the recommendation that we also would join in that. But in the situation, it just doesn't make sense to do that. It does make sense in Torrington High School's conference to join that affiliation. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you very much.
Absolutely.
Is there any allowance for the public to attend games, or will it all be passed out by student athletes? How will that be determined?
So for our indoor events, it is actually dictated by the athletes themselves, because we're down to 250. If we're able to maximize our numbers at outdoor events, it is our hope that we're able to. The reason we set those numbers at 1,750 was we believe that allows for every individual that we've had in the past to attend those games. So it would also include community members. But we will get that information out as soon as we possibly can. I'm hoping on my radio show on Thursday to at least have a direction, whether it be with face coverings or social distancing, and this is what the capacity we will have for each event.
Thank you.
You foresee that those numbers changing during like basketball season?
Ironically, it's funny you asked that, because as a family, we were planning out our Christmases with family and things, and looking ahead at and I asked one of our activities directors, has the Wyoming High School Athletic Association provided any guidance or any preview, and they're really just focusing and hoping that they can get the fall sports in, and then looking eventually, because unfortunately we still have not been approved for 5-on-5 indoor basketball yet. So that is something we're unable to do right now. So I hope so. I hope that we can expand that to allow for more events, and I hope we get to play those seasons also.
Is there anything further to come before the board this evening? I would declare this meeting adjourned then. Thank you, folks. Thank you, student reps and administrators.